The silver ship hung in the darkness between stars like a predator waiting for prey. Dr. Cale Torvin pressed his long, pale fingers against the observation window and watched the strange vessel approach. His species, the Velari, had been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years, but they had never seen anything quite like this. The ship was crewed by Velari standards. Where their vessels were smooth and flowing like water frozen in time, this one looked like it had been hammered together from scrap metal. Burns and scratches covered its hull. Dents and patches showed where it had been repaired many times. Yet somehow it moved through space with purpose and confidence. "What do you think, Doctor?" asked Commander Zephyrilani. Her voice carried the musical tone that all Velari possessed, but there was tension beneath it. "Should we make contact?" Cale studied the readings on his scanner. The life forms inside are unlike anything in our database. Their biology appears ... primitive, yet they have achieved space travel. How curious. The alien ship carried the name New Soul painted on its side in symbols that meant nothing to the Velari. Inside, 3 beings worked at control panels, unaware they were being watched. Cale activated the deep scan and gasped at what he saw. "Commander, these creatures evolved on a Class 12 world." Rilani's skin shifted to a pale blue, the color of shock among her people. "That's impossible. Nothing intelligent can evolve on a death world." But the scans did not lie. The planet these beings came from was a nightmare of extreme weather, deadly radiation, and constant natural disasters. Volcanoes, earthquakes, ice ages, and meteor impacts had shaped their evolution. Most species would have died out in the first generation. Yet somehow these humans had not only survived, but thrived. "Look at their bone density," Cale whispered. "Their muscle structure, their redundant organ systems. They're built like living tanks." The human ship continued on its path toward a distant asteroid field. Cale watched the beings inside work with efficient movements. They showed no fear of the dangerous rocks ahead. In fact, they seemed eager to reach them. "They're miners," Rilani observed. "They seek out danger for profit." "Or perhaps danger is normal for them," Cale replied. The decision to capture the human ship was not difficult. The Velari needed to study these impossible creatures. They used their gravity nets to disable the vessel's engines and brought it into their cargo bay. The humans inside made no attempt to surrender. Instead, they prepared for a fight they could not win. Cale entered the human ship with a full team of guards. The air inside was thick and heavy, full of scents that made his sensitive nose wrinkle. Everything was too bright, too loud, too harsh. How could any being live in such conditions? The first human they encountered was standing in the corridor, with his hands raised, but his eyes showed no fear. He was shorter than a Velari, but broader, with skin the color of warm earth and dark hair. His name, they learned later, was Hyunwoo Kim. "I'm the captain," he said in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. "These are my people. What do you want?" Cale was surprised. Most species would be cowering by now. The Velari appearance was designed to intimidate, tall, pale, with large eyes and sharp features. But this human looked at them with curiosity instead of terror. "We wish to study you," Cale said through his translator. "You will not be harmed if you cooperate." Hyunwoo laughed, a sound that made the Velari guards step back. "Study us? Well, that's a new one. Usually people just want to steal our cargo." The second human appeared from the engine room. She was smaller than the captain, with long black hair tied back and oil stains on her clothes. Her name was Nari Park, and she looked at the Velari technology with the eyes of an engineer. "Gravity manipulation?" she said, examining their weapons. "Impressive. The power requirements must be enormous." Again, Cale was surprised. Where was the fear, the begging? This female was analyzing their weapons instead of cowering from them. The third human emerged from what appeared to be a medical bay. He was thin and careful in his movements, with gentle hands and kind eyes. Jun Lee introduced himself as the ship's medic and immediately began asking about the health of the Velari crew. "Have you been eating properly?" he asked Commander Rilani. "You look pale, even for your species." And your breathing seems shallow. Are you getting enough oxygen? Rilani stared at him in amazement. You are our prisoner and you're concerned about my health? Suffering is suffering, June replied with a small smile. It doesn't matter what species you are. Kale ordered the humans to be brought to his laboratory ship. As they walked through the corridors, he watched them carefully. They showed no signs of the stress that would normally overwhelm captured beings. Instead, they looked around with interest, asking questions about Valari technology and culture. How many species are in your empire? Hyun-woo asked. 47 at last count, Kale replied, all peaceful. All wise enough to avoid conflict. With us. Double quotes Hyun-woo nodded thoughtfully. Fear-based compliance. Effective but not sustainable long-term. The comment bothered Kale more than he cared to admit. How could a primitive being understand galactic politics so quickly? When they reached the laboratory, Kale began his initial examinations. The humans submitted to the scans without protest, though they asked many questions about the equipment. Nari was particularly interested in the medical scanners and began suggesting improvements to their design. The results were astounding. Human bones were 3 times denser than any known species. Their muscles contained fibers that could contract with incredible force. Their nervous systems were redundant and robust. Most shocking of all, their pain receptors were severely limited compared to other beings. Doctor, his assistant whispered, their pain threshold readings are off the scale. Kale checked the readings himself. Among the Valari, pain was immediate and overwhelming. A minor injury could incapacitate them for days. But these humans seemed built to ignore pain entirely. Let me understand, he said to Hyun-woo. You regularly experience physical discomfort that would disable most species? You mean like working 8-hour shifts in asteroid belts with radiation levels that cook electronics? Hyun-woo shrugged. Sure, it's not fun, but it pays well. And you do this voluntarily? Of course. How else would we make a living? Kale felt a chill run down his spine. These beings didn't just tolerate pain. They sought out dangerous situations as routine work. What kind of evolutionary pressure could create such madness? As the day ended, Kale watched the humans settle into their holding cells. They had been captured, scanned, and imprisoned, yet they showed no signs of despair. Instead, they were planning. The gravity generator has a 17-second cycle, Nari whispered to her companions. If we can overload the power coupling during the reset phase, The guards change shifts every 4 hours, Hyun-woo added. The new ones always take 30 seconds to adjust their equipment. I've been watching their stress responses, June sighed quietly. They're more afraid of us than we are of them. Kale realized with growing unease that his test subjects were not broken by their capture. They were adapting to it, planning around it, learning from it. For the first time in his long life, Dr. Kale Torvin began to wonder if capturing these humans had been a mistake. But his scientific curiosity was stronger than his caution. Tomorrow he would begin the real tests. He had no idea what he was about to unleash. The morning light in the Valari laboratory was soft and blue, designed to be comfortable for their sensitive eyes. Dr. Kale Torvin stood before a wall of monitors showing the vital signs of his 3 human subjects. After a night of analysis, he had convinced himself that the initial readings were wrong. No species could truly have such incredible pain tolerance. Today, he would prove it. Begin with the smallest subject, he told his assistant. The female engineer. Nari Park was brought into the examination room in restraints that could hold a Thurian battle beast. She looked around the chamber with obvious interest, taking note of every piece of equipment. When her eyes fell on the neural stimulator array, she actually smiled. Electrical nerve induction? She asked. Clever design. You're using focused electromagnetic fields to trigger pain responses without physical damage. Very efficient. Kale blinked in surprise. You understand the purpose of this device? Of course. You want to test our pain limits. Nari settled into the examination chair as if she were visiting a dentist. I'm curious about your methodology. Are you starting with baseline measurements or jumping straight to threshold testing? The casual way she discussed her own torture unsettled Kale more than he cared to admit. Among his people, even the mention of pain caused visible distress. Yet this human spoke of it like a technical problem to be solved. We will begin with low-level stimulation, he said. Activating the first setting, the machine hummed to life, sending carefully calibrated electrical pulses into Nari's nervous system. The setting was designed to cause moderate discomfort in most species, enough to make them cooperative without causing permanent damage. Nari's vital signs showed the pain signals reaching her brain, but her expression remained unchanged. If anything, she looked more alert. Interesting, she said, as if commenting on the weather. The pulse frequency is creating interference patterns in my nerve clusters. You might get better results if you adjusted the carrier wave to match human neural oscillations? Kale stared at his monitors in disbelief. The pain levels should have been overwhelming, yet she was giving him technical advice? He increased the intensity. The second setting was designed to incapacitate most beings. Velari guards use this level to subdue violent criminals. The electrical pulses should have left her unconscious with agony. Instead, Nari tilted her head thoughtfully. That's better. I can feel the current moving through my spinal column now. Your targeting is impressive. Most species probably can't even function at this level. Most species, Kale repeated weakly. He increased the power again. The third setting had never been used on a living being. It was theoretical, a level that should cause so much pain that death would be preferable. The machine's safety protocols had to be overridden to reach it. Nari's body tensed as the electrical storm hit her nervous system. For a moment, Kale thought he had finally found her limit. Then she took a deep breath and began to speak. The neural cascade is fascinating, she said, her voice tight but controlled. I can feel each individual nerve firing in sequence. It's like watching a lightning storm from inside the cloud. Kale shut off the machine with shaking hands. His assistant had turned pale blue with shock. The readings showed that Nari had experienced pain levels that would have killed most species, yet she was analyzing the experience like a scientific phenomenon. How? He whispered. Nari flexed her fingers, testing her motor control. How do we tolerate pain? Practice, mostly. Earth isn't a gentle place. You learn to work through pain or you don't survive. But surely you must have limits. Oh, we do. But they're probably not where you think they are. She paused, studying his shocked expression. Doctor, what's the worst pain your species has ever experienced? Kale thought of the most horrible injury in Velari history, a researcher who had accidentally touched a live power conduit. The pain had been so severe that he had died of shock within minutes. Electrical burns, he said. The victim experienced approximately 12 units of neural stimulation before his system shut down. Nari nodded sympathetically. That sounds terrible. For comparison, I once worked a 16-hour shift in a mining facility where the radiation shielding had failed. The exposure gave me what we call rad burns, basically cooking me from the inside. I finished my shift because we needed the overtime pay. How much pain was that? According to medical scans afterward. About 47 units on your scale. Kale's legs nearly gave out. That's impossible. Not impossible. Just unusual by galactic standards, apparently. Nari looked at the neural stimulator with professional interest. Mind if I take a look at the technical specifications? I think I could help you improve the efficiency. The rest of the day passed in a blur of impossible results. They tested Haiyan-Wu next, using physical pain instead of electrical pressure. Points that should have left him begging for mercy only made him grunt with annoyance. Techniques that could break the will of any known species left him cracking jokes. You know, Haiyan-Wu said as they applied increasing pressure to his joints, this reminds me of my first job in the asteroid mines. The artificial gravity kept malfunctioning, so we worked in suits that squeezed us like toothpaste tubes. Paid well, though. When they tested thermal pain, carefully controlled burns that should have sent him into shock, he actually seemed To relax, warm, he said contentedly. Reminds me of home. Ever been in a volcanic region, Doc? Nothing like a nice hot sulfur spring after a hard day's work. June was the most disturbing of all. The medic submitted to psychological pain tests, simulated scenarios designed to break mental resistance. They showed him images of his homeworld burning, his friends dying, his species enslaved. Instead of breaking down, June began analyzing the Volari who were conducting the tests. "You're projecting your own fears," he told the technician who was running the simulation. "These scenarios upset you more than they upset me. When did you lose someone close to you?" The technician stepped back, shocked. "How did you The way you flinch when the images show death. The catch in your breathing when families are separated. You've experienced loss and it still hurts you." June's voice was gentle despite the restraints holding him down. "Grief is normal. It means you love someone." By the end of the day, half of Cale's research team was receiving counseling from their test subject. June had somehow turned a torture session into group therapy. That evening, Cale stood in his office, staring at the test results. Every measurement confirmed what he didn't want to believe. Humans didn't just tolerate extraordinary pain, they functioned through it. They thought. Through it. They remained fundamentally human despite experiencing agony that would destroy any other known species. "Sir?" His assistant appeared in the doorway, still pale from the day's events. "The humans have requested to speak with you." Cale found them in their holding area, sitting calmly despite everything they had endured. They showed no signs of trauma, no indication that they had spent the day being systematically tortured. "Doctor," Haiyan Wu said, "we've been talking, and we wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" Cale couldn't hide his confusion. "Your tests taught us a lot about our own capabilities," Nari explained. "I never knew exactly how much electrical current I could handle. Very useful data for future mining operations. And your psychological evaluation methods are fascinating," June added. "I'd love to collaborate on a paper about cross-species stress responses." Cale stared at them, realizing with growing horror that his torture had only made them more knowledgeable and more confident. They weren't broken by pain, they learned from it. "What are you?" he whispered. Haiyan Wu shrugged. "We're just people, Doc. People from a world that doesn't make it easy to survive. You adapt or you die." That night, Cale sent his first report to the Volari High Command. But instead of writing about successful interrogation techniques, he found himself drafting a warning about beings who could not be broken by conventional means. The humans slept peacefully in their cells, already planning tomorrow's escape attempt. Dr. Cale Torvin had not slept well. His dreams were filled with images of beings who smiled while being tortured, who analyzed their own pain like a mathematical equation. The physical tests had proven that humans possessed impossible pain tolerance. But Cale needed to understand their mental limits. Every species had a breaking point in their mind. Even if their body could endure, he would start with isolation. June. Lee was moved to a special chamber deep in the ship's core. The room was perfectly silent, perfectly dark, and perfectly empty. No sound, no light, no stimulation of any kind. Most beings would begin to hallucinate within hours. The Volari themselves could only endure 30 minutes before their minds started to fracture. Cale activated the monitoring systems and settled in to watch. According to his calculations, the humans should begin showing signs of distress within the first hour. Panic would follow, then desperate pleas for release. Instead, June sat down in the center of the room and began to meditate. "Fascinating," he said to the darkness, apparently aware that he was being observed. "Complete sensory deprivation. This is actually quite restful. On our mining ships, there's always noise, engines humming, people talking, machines working. I'd forgotten how peaceful real quiet can be." Cale checked his instruments twice. The isolation chamber was functioning perfectly. No sound, no light, no external stimulation of any kind. Yet the human's vital signs showed relaxation, not distress. Hours passed. June began talking to himself, but not in the rambling, desperate way that other species did. Instead, he started telling stories. "Let me tell you about my grandmother." he said to the empty air. She lived through the Great Famine on Earth's colony world of New Jeju. 90% of the crops failed due to solar radiation. People were dying of starvation, and the supply ships couldn't reach them because of meteor storms. Kale found himself leaning forward, drawn into the story despite himself. Grandmother was a doctor then, just like me. She had to perform surgery without anesthesia because the medical supplies had run out. Can you imagine cutting into someone who's awake and feeling everything? But she saved hundreds of lives that way. She taught me that pain is just information. It tells you something is wrong, but it doesn't have to control you. The isolation continued for 3 days. Most species would be completely insane by now, begging for death rather than continued sensory deprivation. June just kept telling stories, sharing memories, and occasionally humming songs from his homeworld. When Kale finally opened the chamber, he found June sitting in the same meditative position, looking refreshed and alert. "Thank you," June said sincerely. "I haven't had that much uninterrupted thinking time in years. Very therapeutic." Kale's hands shook as he made his notes. Isolation had not only failed to break the human, it had somehow made him stronger. Next came the fear conditioning. Kale designed a series of scenarios guaranteed to trigger primal terror responses. He showed June images of his homeworld burning, his friends being killed, his entire species enslaved or destroyed. The human watched with calm attention, occasionally asking technical questions about the simulation quality. "The fire effects are quite good," he commented as Earth burned on the screen. "Though the smoke patterns aren't quite right for a planetary atmosphere. Are you using particle physics modeling or just visual approximation?" "This is your world dying," Kale said desperately. "Your people screaming in agony. How can you remain calm?" June was quiet for a moment, watching the simulated destruction. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than distressed. "Doctor, may I ask about your species' history? Have the Velari ever faced extinction? Of course not. We evolved on a peaceful world with abundant resources." "I see. That explains a lot." June turned away from the burning world to look directly at Kale. "Humans have faced extinction dozens of times. Ice ages, supervolcanoes, asteroid impacts, plagues, wars. We've seen our cities burn before. We've buried our dead and rebuilt from ashes." He gestured to the screen showing Earth's destruction. "This is terrible, yes. But it's also familiar. We know how to survive the end of the world because we've done it before." Kale realized with growing horror that the images meant to inspire terror were just reminding the human of his species' resilience. The psychological torture continued for days. Kale tried everything: simulated betrayal by loved ones, threats to family members, scenarios designed to trigger guilt and shame and despair. Nothing worked. Worse than not working, the tests seemed to be having the opposite effect. June began analyzing the Velari conducting the tests. "You're afraid," he told Dr. Kale during one session. "These scenarios terrify you more than they do me. When you show me images of people being hurt, your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes shallow. You're experiencing secondary trauma from your own experiments." "I'm not the subject here," Kale snapped. "Everyone is a subject, Doctor. Mental health doesn't stop being important just because you're the one holding the scanner." June's voice was gentle but persistent. "When did you first see violence?" Despite himself, Kale found himself answering. "During my research training. We studied footage of wars from primitive worlds. The images gave me nightmares for months. That's normal. Velari minds aren't designed to process extreme trauma. But you're forcing yourself to watch violence and suffering every day. That's going to damage you psychologically." By the third day, June had somehow turned the psychological evaluation into a therapy session for the Velari staff. Research assistants were telling him about their fears and anxieties. Guards were discussing their stress-related health problems. Even hardened military personnel found themselves opening up to the human who should have been their prisoner. "How are you doing this?" Kale demanded. "You should be broken by now," Shattered, begging for mercy. "I'm a medic, Doctor. My job is to help people heal, regardless of the circumstances." June looked around the room at the Velari staff, many of whom were now receiving what amounted to psychological counseling from their test subject. Your people are in pain. Emotional pain, mental strain from conducting these experiments. That pain is real, even if it's different from physical injury. But what about your pain? We've tortured you for days, June shrugged. Pain passes. It always does, but healing, that's something you can build on. That evening, Cale made a disturbing discovery. Several of his research assistants had submitted requests for extended psychological evaluation sessions with the human subject. 2 guards had asked if they could speak with June about family problems. His head technician wanted to discuss career anxiety. The human they were supposed to be breaking was instead providing mental health services to their entire crew. Cale called an emergency meeting with Commander Rilani. The psychological testing has failed, he reported. Worse than failed. The human is somehow using our interrogation sessions to heal our own people's psychological trauma. That's impossible. I have medical files. Stress levels among the research team have dropped 40% since we began testing. Sleep quality has improved. Several staff members report feeling more mentally stable than they have in years. Rilani's skin shifted to deep purple, the color of profound confusion. He's turned torture into therapy. Not intentionally, I think. It seems to be instinctive. When faced with suffering, his own or others', his first response is to try to heal it. Cale showed her the recordings of June's sessions. Hour after hour of the human calmly enduring psychological torture while simultaneously providing emotional support to his torturers. What kind of evolution creates this? Rilani whispered. The kind that happens on a world where survival depends on cooperation under extreme stress, Cale replied. They don't just endure suffering, they transform it into strength for their entire group. That night, Cale found himself outside June's holding cell. The human was sitting quietly, reading from a data pad they had given him for psychological testing. Doctor, June said without looking up, you seem troubled. Would you like to talk about it? Cale almost laughed at the absurdity. Here was his prisoner offering to counsel him. But the offer was sincere, and Cale realized he desperately needed someone to talk to. I've been a researcher for 30 years, he said. I thought I understood the nature of sentient beings. But your species? You defy everything we know about psychology and biology. We're not that different, June replied gently. We just come from a harder place. That changes how you see problems. How can you be so calm, so kind? We've tortured you. June looked up from his reading, and his eyes held no anger, no hatred, no desire for revenge. Only compassion. Doctor, hurt people, but healed people heal people. Your species hasn't faced the kind of trauma that teaches you how to transform suffering into strength. That's not your fault, it's just your experience. Cale stared at the human who had turned their most advanced psychological warfare into group therapy. Tomorrow, he would have to report that humans could not be broken mentally any more than they could be broken physically, but tonight, for the first time in years, Dr. Cale Torvin found himself sleeping peacefully. Neri Park had always been good with machines. On Earth, she could make broken equipment sing like new with just spare parts and determination. But the Villari technology surrounding her was like nothing she had ever seen before. During her daily examinations, she watched everything with the hungry eyes of an engineer who lived to understand how things worked. Today, Dr. Cale seemed distracted. His usual careful attention to monitoring equipment was sloppy, his focus elsewhere. Neri noticed that he left his personal data tablet connected to the main research network when he stepped out to consult with an assistant. The opportunity was too good to pass up. Nari had been studying the Villari interface for days, memorizing the symbols and patterns. Their computer systems were elegant but not particularly secure, apparently. They had never encountered a species clever enough to break into their technology while being tortured. Her fingers moved quickly across the tablet's surface, navigating through layers of data that painted a picture of the galaxy beyond Earth. What she found made her blood run cold. The Villari database contained biological profiles of 47 different species. As she read through them, a pattern emerged that filled her with growing dread. Every single species had evolved on what the Valari classified as garden worlds, planets with stable climates, gentle weather, abundant resources, and few natural predators. The galactic standard for habitability was a world where the biggest environmental challenge might be a seasonal drought or an occasional storm. Then she found Earth's classification, Class 12 Deathworld. Nari stared at the screen, reading and rereading their classification criteria. Class the 12th was the highest rating on their scale, a world so hostile that complex life shouldn't be able to evolve at all. According to Valari science, no intelligent species had ever emerged from anything higher than a Class 3 world. The database contained a detailed analysis of Earth's environment that read like a catalog of horrors. Massive ice ages that lasted for millennia. Supervolcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for years. Asteroid impacts that sterilized continents. Radiation levels that would cook most known species. Predators that made the worst galactic monsters look like house pets, and that was just the natural environment. The database also contained information about human history, the wars, the famines, the plagues, the disasters that had shaped their evolution. Species that lived on garden worlds fought over resources occasionally. Humans had spent their entire evolutionary history in a state of constant struggle for survival. No wonder we don't break, Nari whispered to herself. She dug deeper into the files, accessing medical data from across the galaxy. The picture that emerged was stunning. The average pain tolerance across all known species was less than 1/10 of what humans considered normal. What humans thought of as minor discomfort would incapacitate most galactic citizens. Even more shocking was the psychological data. Every other species in the galaxy suffered from what humans would consider severe anxiety disorders when faced with even minor stress. The threat of food shortage could cause mass panic. Weather changes led to population-wide depression. The possibility of conflict sent entire civilizations into psychological shutdown. Humans, by contrast, seemed to thrive under pressure. My God, Nari breathed, scrolling through comparison charts. We're not the normal ones. Everyone else is. The data painted a picture of a galaxy filled with beings so psychologically fragile that they could barely function outside of perfect conditions. The Valari Empire maintained control not through superior technology or military might, but simply because no other species could handle the stress of rebellion. Until now, Nari found files on what the Valari called stress response syndrome, a condition that affected every known species when exposed to uncertainty or danger. Symptoms included paralysis, panic attacks, complete psychological breakdown, and often death from shock. The Valari. Medical texts treated this as a normal biological response to threat. Humans didn't even have a word for it. She discovered that the Valari themselves were considered unusually hardy by galactic standards. Their ability to endure mild discomfort for short periods was seen as exceptional resilience. Yet Nari had watched Dr. Kale flinch and show stress symptoms just from observing human pain tolerance tests. The more she read, the more she understood how fundamentally different humans were. Every other species had evolved expecting the universe to be safe and predictable. When it wasn't, they broke. Humans had evolved expecting the universe to be actively trying to kill them. When it was, they adapted. Nari found historical records of first contact between various species and the Valari. In every case, the inferior technology of the newly discovered species had been less important than their immediate psychological surrender when faced with superior force. Most species literally couldn't conceive of fighting against impossible odds, but humans had been fighting impossible odds. Since they first developed consciousness, she accessed files on galactic military theory and felt her heart sink. The entire basis of Valari strategy relied on psychological warfare, inflicting enough pain and fear to break enemy resistance without having to actually destroy them. It was efficient and effective against every known species. It would be completely useless against humans. The galaxy has no idea what's coming, she murmured. Footsteps in the corridor warned her that Dr. Kale was returning. Nari quickly copied the most important files to a hidden partition on the medical scanner that monitored her vital signs during testing. If she was right about human adaptability, she could find a way to retrieve the data later. When Kale entered the examination room, he found Nari sitting calmly in the restraint chair, giving no indication that she had just accessed classified information that redefined humanity's place in the galaxy. "Good morning, Doctor," she said pleasantly. "Ready for another round of tests?" Kale seemed troubled, distracted by his own growing doubts about the experiments. He activated the neural stimulator array without his usual careful calibration, sending random pulses of electrical pain through Nari's nervous system. She endured it with the same calm competence she had shown from the beginning. But now she understood why her reaction so terrified the Valari researchers. They weren't just seeing impossible pain tolerance. They were seeing proof that humans were fundamentally different from every other form of life in the galaxy. "Doctor," she said during a pause in the testing, "may I ask you a question?" "What is it? How did your species achieve space travel? Given your low tolerance for environmental stress, the challenges of spaceflight must have been overwhelming." Kale looked puzzled by the question. "We developed very sophisticated life support systems. Our ships maintain perfect environmental conditions at all times. Temperature, atmosphere, radiation shielding, everything is controlled to eliminate any possibility of discomfort. And if something goes wrong, we have multiple redundant systems, backup systems for the backup systems. The possibility of crew exposure to hostile conditions is virtually eliminated," Nari nodded thoughtfully. "Humans take a different approach. We build systems that can fail safely, and we train our people to operate in hostile environments. Most of our deep space workers can survive in hard vacuum for several minutes if necessary." The electrical stimulation resumed, but Nari barely noticed it now. Her mind was racing with the implications of what she had learned. Humans weren't just tougher than other species, they were fundamentally adapted for a different kind of universe. While every other species had developed technology to avoid adversity, humans had developed themselves to overcome it. "Dr. Kale," she said, "I think your research has been asking the wrong question." "What do you mean?" "You've been trying to find our breaking point. But what if we don't have one? What if the ability to endure unlimited stress is our primary evolutionary advantage?" Kale's hand stilled on the control panel. "That's impossible. Every species has limits." "Every species you've encountered so far," Nari corrected. "But you've never met anyone from a Class 12 world before." That evening, as Nari was returned to her holding cell, she shared her discoveries with Hinowu and June. The three humans sat in the artificial twilight of their prison, contemplating what they had learned. "So we're the monsters," Hyenwu said with dark humor. "The terrifying apex predators that the galaxy never expected to meet." "Not monsters," June corrected gently. "Just different, shaped by different pressures." "The question is," Nari said, "what do we do with this information?" They talked long into the night, three humans from a death world planning their next move in a galaxy that had no idea what was coming. Outside their cell, the Valari researchers slept uneasily, troubled by dreams of beings who could not be broken. The revelation changed everything. Humans weren't just unusually tough, they were living proof that the galaxy's entire understanding of life, evolution, and survival was wrong. And soon the rest of the galaxy would find out. Dr. Kale Torvin stood before the assembled Valari High Council via holographic transmission, his reputation hanging by a thread. 3 weeks of testing had produced results that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about intelligent life. The council members, their pale faces stern with disapproval, were not pleased with his reports. "Impossible," declared Council Prime Vex Morlani. "You claim these creatures have no upper limit to pain tolerance." "All beings have breaking points, Doctor. Find theirs." "With respect, Council Prime, we have already exceeded safe testing parameters by a factor of 10, then exceed them by a factor of 20. Use whatever methods necessary. We must understand these beings before they become a threat to galactic stability." Kale felt a chill in his bones. The authorization gave him unlimited power to conduct experiments that violated every ethical standard the Volari had developed over millennia. But the Council was frightened, and frightened beings made desperate decisions. Understood, Council Prime. The transmission ended, leaving Kale alone with orders that amounted to sanctioned torture without limits. He had 48 hours to either break the humans or prove definitively that they could not be broken. He decided to start with Captain Hyunwoo Kim. The new testing chamber had been designed specifically for this purpose. Neural induction arrays that could generate pain levels theoretically high enough to stop a heart through shock. Psychological warfare systems that could project nightmares directly into a subject's mind. Physical stress chambers that could simulate the pressure of a collapsing star. When Hyunwoo was brought in, he looked around the chamber with the same calm interest he had shown since his capture. The restraint system was powerful enough to hold a full-grown Krillian war beast, yet he settled into it as if it were a comfortable chair. New equipment? He asked conversationally. Very impressive. Industrial-grade neural stimulators. If I'm not mistaken, those must draw enormous power. Kale activated the first array without preamble. The pain levels were immediately set to what should have been lethal intensity. Most species would have died from shock within seconds. Hyunwoo's body went rigid as the electrical storm hit his nervous system. His vital signs spiked to dangerous levels. For a moment, Kale thought they had finally found the limit. Then Hyunwoo began to laugh. That's new, he said through gritted teeth. Feels like the time I got caught in a lightning storm on Kepler 442b. Ever been struck by lightning, Doc? It's educational. Kale stared at his readings in disbelief. The pain levels were off every scale they had. The human should be unconscious, possibly dead. Instead, he was making casual conversation. This is impossible, Kale whispered. Not impossible. Just really, really unpleasant. Hyunwoo's voice was strained but steady. Though I have to say, your technique could use work. The current distribution is uneven. You're getting hotspots that cause localized nerve damage without maximizing the overall pain experience. The human was giving him technical advice while being tortured beyond any previously known limits. Kale activated the psychological warfare array. The system flooded Hyunwoo's mind with images of terror, Earth burning, his crew dying in agony, his species enslaved and broken. Scenarios designed to shatter sanity through pure despair. Hyunwoo watched the projected nightmares with the detached interest of a film critic. The visual resolution is excellent, he commented, though the emotional manipulation is a bit heavy-handed. You might get better results with subtler psychological pressure. Fear works best when it builds slowly. These are images of everything. You care about being destroyed. Yes, I noticed. Very thorough. Hyunwoo paused as another wave of artificial terror washed over him. The thing is, Doc, humans have been imagining the end of the world since we first developed consciousness. We have entire entertainment industries based on disaster scenarios. This is well crafted, but it's not exactly original. Kale felt his sanity beginning to slip. The readings showed that Hyunwoo's mind was being subjected to psychological trauma that should have left him a drooling vegetable. Instead, he was critiquing the special effects. In desperation, Kale activated the physical stress chamber. Pressure equivalent to being at the bottom of a gas giant's ocean crushed down on Hyunwoo's body. The force should have liquefied his bones. The human grimaced as his skeleton compressed under impossible weight. But he didn't lose consciousness. This reminds me of deep core mining, he said with effort. We used to work in pressure suits at the bottom of Europa's ice-covered ocean. The equipment was always malfunctioning, so you'd end up working in crushing pressure for hours at a time. How are you still conscious? Kale screamed. Practice, Hyunwoo replied simply. For 18 hours, Kale pushed every system beyond its design limits. He combined neural pain with psychological trauma and physical stress in combinations that should have killed any known species. Hyunwoo endured it all with the same grim competence he had shown from the beginning. Worse, he began using the torture session to plan his escape. The neural array draws power directly from your main reactor, he observed during a brief pause between tortures. If someone were to overload the induction coils, the feedback would probably disable your security systems. Are you planning to escape? Of course. Nothing personal, Doc, but I have a job to finish. My crew is counting on me to get them home. Kale realized with growing horror that 18 hours of torture beyond any previously known limits had only made the human more determined to resist. The testing of Nari Park was even more disturbing. The engineer seemed genuinely fascinated by the equipment being used to torture her. Between screams of agony, she asked technical questions about power distribution and control systems. The harmonic resonance in the neural induction array is causing efficiency losses, she gasped while being subjected to pain levels that defied measurement. If you adjusted the wave frequency to match human nervous system patterns, you could probably increase the effective pain output by 30%. Why are you helping us torture you more effectively? Professional curiosity, Nari replied. Bad engineering bothers me more than physical pain. When they tested her psychological limits, Nari turned the session into an impromptu engineering consultation. While horrific images played in her mind, she analyzed the projection technology and suggested improvements to the holographic display systems. The emotional impact algorithms are interesting, she said while watching simulated versions of her loved ones die in gruesome detail, but they're based on Valari psychology. Human emotional responses follow different patterns. You get better results if you studied our neurochemistry first. June was the most unnerving of all. No matter what they did to him, his first concern was always for the well-being of his torturers. Dr. Kale, you haven't been sleeping, he observed while strapped to a table that was systematically breaking every bone in his body. The stress of conducting these experiments is affecting your health. You should consider taking a break. I am not the one being tortured. Pain is pain, June said gently as his ribs cracked under mechanical pressure. Physical pain, emotional pain, moral pain, they all damage the soul if you don't address them properly. Even while experiencing agony beyond description, June somehow turned the conversation toward Kale's own psychological trauma. By the end of the session, the Valari doctor found himself discussing his childhood, fears and professional anxieties with his torture victim. After 48 hours of unlimited experimentation, Kale stood in his laboratory surrounded by readings that proved the impossible. They had subjected 3 humans to pain levels that exceeded the theoretical limits of nervous system function. They had broken their bodies, shattered their bones, and flooded their minds with pure terror. The humans were battered, exhausted, and hurt, but they were not broken. Hyun Woo was still planning escape routes. Nari was still analyzing their technology. June was still trying to provide medical advice to his captors. The breaking point, Kale whispered to himself, doesn't exist. He activated the communication array to report to the High Council, knowing that his words would change the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be human. Council Prime? He said, his voice hollow with exhaustion and fear. I have completed the unlimited testing protocols. Excellent. Have you found their limits? Kale looked at the monitoring screens showing 3 humans who had endured more punishment than should be survivable, yet remained fundamentally unbroken in body and spirit. No, Council Prime, I believe we have found something far more terrifying. Explain. They don't break, they adapt. Every torture technique we've used has only taught them more about our capabilities and limitations. We haven't broken their resistance, we've educated it. The silence from the council was deafening. Council Prime, Kale continued, we have discovered a species that treats our most advanced psychological warfare as an interesting intellectual exercise. They endure our worst physical tortures while planning improvements to our equipment. They cannot be controlled through pain because pain is not, for them, a controlling factor. Recommendation? Kale thought of Hyun Woo's easy confidence, Nari's unstoppable curiosity, and June's impossible compassion. 3 humans who had faced the worst the galaxy could offer and emerged stronger. Release them immediately. The Valari High Council's response to Dr. Kale's report was swift and predictable. Terminate the human subjects immediately and destroy all evidence of their existence. The authorization came through encrypted channels with instructions that brooked no argument. The humans were too dangerous to live, too valuable to study, and too unpredictable to control. Kale stared at the termination order with hands that shook like autumn leaves. 48 hours of unlimited testing had proven that humans could not be broken by conventional means. Now the Council wanted them eliminated before they could escape and warn their species about the galaxy beyond Earth. "Sir," his assistant appeared in the doorway, pale blue with stress. "Security is asking about the enhanced containment protocols." "Tell them to implement maximum security," Kale said quietly, "and schedule the subjects for final examination ... in 6 hours. But as he spoke the words, Kale realized he was looking at creatures who had survived everything the galaxy could throw at them. Did the Council really believe that simple termination would be easier than the elaborate tortures they had already endured? In their holding cells, the 3 humans sensed the change in atmosphere immediately. "They're going to kill us," Hyan-Wu said without emotion, watching the guard rotations through the small window in their cell door. "Security patterns have shifted to termination protocols." "I noticed," Nari replied, her fingers working at a small piece of metal she had somehow acquired during the transport back from the laboratory. "The power distribution has changed, too. They're routing additional energy to the containment systems." "How long do we have?" June asked. 6 hours, maybe less." Hyan-Wu stretched muscles that still ached from the torture sessions. "Anyone have a plan that doesn't involve dying horribly?" Nari held up the piece of metal, a small component she had palmed from one of the neural stimulator arrays during her torture session. "Remember how I mentioned that the neural induction system draws power directly from their main reactor? You managed to steal part of their equipment while being tortured?" Han-Wu stared at her with new respect. "The pain was quite distracting," Nari said with a slight smile. "I don't think they noticed when I redirected their attention to my screaming instead of my hands." She had been working on the component for hours, using techniques learned from years of jury-rigging broken mining equipment in hostile environments. What she held now was no longer a simple circuit board, but a carefully modified feedback device. "This will cause a cascade failure in their power grid," she explained. "But only if we can get it to the right location in their ship." "Which would be where?" June asked. "The main power coupling, 17 decks up and heavily guarded." Nari's expression was grim. "And we'd have to get there while enduring whatever security measures they have in place." "Security measures," Hyan-Wu repeated thoughtfully. "You mean like pain fields, neural disruptors, and paralysis beams?" "Exactly, so standard Tuesday on a human mining rig." They spent the next 2 hours planning. The escape route would require them to travel through sections of the ship designed to incapacitate intruders through massive pain infliction. Most species would be stopped immediately by security systems that turned corridors into torture chambers, but humans had spent 3 weeks learning exactly how much pain they could endure. When the guards came to collect them for final examination, they found 3 prisoners who seemed resigned to their fate. Hyan-Wu walked with his head down, Nari appeared lost in thought, and June seemed to be praying quietly. The Valari saw what they expected to see. Defeated subjects preparing for death. They didn't notice Hyan-Wu memorizing guard positions, Nari calculating power flow patterns, or June analyzing stress responses in their captors. The corridor leading to the execution chamber was heavily defended with automated security systems. Painfield generators lined the walls, ready to incapacitate anyone not wearing proper identification tags. Neural disruptors hung from the ceiling like metallic spiders, programmed to shut down nervous systems with precisely targeted electromagnetic pulses. When Hyan-Wu broke away from the guards and sprinted toward the power coupling access, the entire corridor came alive with defensive measures. The pain fields activated first, filling the air with energy designed to cause immediate and overwhelming agony. Most beings would have collapsed instantly. Screaming and begging for mercy, Hyan-Wu gritted his teeth and kept running. "Persistent little monster," he muttered as waves of artificial pain washed over him. The sensation was like being simultaneously burned, electrocuted, and crushed, but it was nothing he hadn't experienced during the torture sessions. The neural disruptors fired next, sending targeted electromagnetic pulses designed to shut down his nervous system. The weapons had been calibrated for standard galactic physiology, beings with delicate neural networks that could be easily disrupted, human brains. Evolved on a world of constant electromagnetic storms and radiation exposure, proved remarkably resistant to such attacks. Hyun Woo stumbled as the disruptors hit him, his vision blurring and his coordination suffering. But his nervous system, toughened by a lifetime of exposure to industrial radiation and electrical accidents, refused to shut down completely. Behind him, Nari and June had broken free from their own guards and were following the same hellish path. Nari ran through the pain fields while calculating the frequency modulations needed to disrupt the ship's power grid. The agony was incredible, but her mind remained clear and focused. June endured the neural disruptors while analyzing the psychological state of the guards who were pursuing them. Even while his own nervous system was under attack, he noticed signs of severe stress and trauma in their captors. "Dr. Kale," he called out as they ran, "your security team needs immediate psychological counseling. This level of violence is damaging their mental health." The absurdity of receiving medical advice from their escaping prisoner momentarily stunned the Valari guards. They reached the power coupling access after a run that would have killed most galactic citizens. The three humans were battered, bleeding, and barely conscious, but they had made it through security systems designed to stop armies. Nari's hands shook as she worked to install her modified component into the ship's power grid. The coupling was protected by proximity pain fields that made her earlier torture sessions seem mild by comparison. "Can't concentrate," she gasped as artificial agony flooded her system. "Tell me what to do," Hyun Woo said, forcing his pain-racked hands to steady. Nari guided him through the installation process, her voice tight with strain but her technical knowledge unimpaired. Even while experiencing pain beyond description, her engineering expertise remained sharp and clear. The device connected with a soft click that seemed impossibly loud in the corridor full of defensive systems. "Now what?" June asked, supporting himself against the wall as neural disruptors continued their assault on his nervous system. "Now we run," Nari said, and activated the cascade failure. The ship's power grid began to collapse in a carefully orchestrated sequence. Lights flickered and died. Artificial gravity wavered. Most importantly, the security systems shut down as their power supply destabilized. The three humans ran through corridors suddenly plunged into darkness, their path lit only by emergency lighting and electrical fires. Behind them, they could hear the confused shouts of Valari crew members who had never experienced ship-wide system failures. They reached the hangar bay where their mining ship was stored, just as the main power core went into emergency shutdown. In the confusion of failing systems and panicking crew, three determined humans reached their vessel and fired up engines that had been designed to operate in the hostile environment of an asteroid field. As the new soul blasted out of the Valari ship's hangar, Hyun Woo looked back at the vessel that had held them prisoner. Emergency lights blinked across its hull as repair crews worked frantically to restore power. "Think they'll come after us?" Nari asked, nursing burns from the pain fields. "Eventually," Hyun Woo replied. "But first they have to fix their ship, calm their crew, and figure out how three prisoners escaped through security systems that have never failed before." June was already breaking out medical supplies to treat their injuries. More importantly, they have to decide whether they want to risk another encounter with humans who now know exactly what their technology can and can't do. As they jumped to hyperspace, leaving the disabled Valari research vessel behind, the three humans began planning their report to Earth's government. They had learned things about the galaxy that would change humanity's place in the universe forever. Behind them, Dr. Kale stood in his darkened laboratory, staring at readings that showed impossible escape routes through impossible security measures. The humans had done more than escape. They had turned their torture into education. their captivity into reconnaissance and their suffering into tactical advantage. For the first time in Valari history, their advanced security systems had been defeated not through superior technology, but through superior endurance. The galaxy was about to learn that some species don't break under pressure, they break everything else instead. Dr. Cale Torvin stood in the emergency council chamber, surrounded by holographic projections of the 47 species that comprised the Valari Empire. The chamber hummed with translated voices speaking in dozens of languages, all expressing the same emotion, fear. 3 days had passed since the human escape. 3 days of system repairs, crew counseling, and desperate attempts to understand how their most secure facility had been compromised by 3 prisoners, who should have been helpless. The images on the main display showed the impossible. Security footage of humans running through pain fields that would have killed most species, enduring neural disruptors that should have shut down their nervous systems, and systematically dismantling technology while being actively tortured by it. Explain this, demanded Council Prime Vex Morlani, his pale face tight with barely controlled panic. How did 3 primitive beings defeat systems designed to contain armies? Cale had spent 72 hours preparing for this moment, reviewing data, checking readings, and questioning his own sanity. The evidence was undeniable, but explaining it required the Council to accept that everything they thought they knew about intelligent life was wrong. Council Prime, honored representatives, he began, the humans did not defeat our systems through superior technology or clever tactics. They simply endured them. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the assembled holographic figures. Representative Vex Corlani of the Zephyrian Commonwealth spoke first. No being can endure our security measures. The pain fields alone generate neural feedback equivalent to having every nerve ending set on fire simultaneously. The humans described it as unpleasant, Cale replied quietly. The chamber fell silent. Impossible, whispered Representative Ila Fremont of the Andromedian Federation. Our torture techniques have maintained galactic peace for 3,000 years. No species has ever resisted them. Cale activated the medical recordings. Vital sign readouts filled the air, showing human responses to pain levels that defied comprehension. Where other species would show cardiac arrest and neural shutdown, the human readings showed stress but continued function. They don't just resist our techniques, Cale explained. They learn from them. Every torture session provided them with detailed information about our technology, our psychology, and our limitations. Council Prime Morlani's skin shifted to deep purple, the color of existential dread among the Valari. You're telling us that our primary method of maintaining order is useless against these creatures? Worse than useless, it educates them. The implications hit the assembled representatives like a physical blow. The entire galactic order was built on the principle that superior technology plus the threat of pain could control any uprising. Species submitted to the Valari Empire because resistance meant suffering, and no being could endure unlimited suffering, but humans could. How many of them are there? Asked Representative Crix Valdane of the Outer Rim Territories. Cale consulted his data. Current estimates suggest approximately 8 billion on their homeworld, with colonies expanding throughout their local stellar region. Their reproduction rate and technological advancement exceed galactic averages. 8 billion apex predators. Someone whispered. They're not predators, Cale corrected, then paused as he realized how much more terrifying the truth was. They're prey animals that refuse to die? He explained what they had learned about Earth, a Class 12 deathworld where everything was designed to kill any life that evolved there. Humans hadn't conquered their planet through superior strength or intelligence. They had simply outlasted everything that tried to destroy them. They evolved being constantly hunted, poisoned, frozen, burned, starved, and irradiated, Cale continued. Their entire development as a species was shaped by the need to endure suffering and continue functioning. Pain, to them, is just information. Representative Morlani leaned forward. What is your recommendation, Doctor? Cale had dreaded this moment. His scientific career, his reputation, and possibly his life hung on the next words he spoke. We must warn the galaxy immediately. Every species, every government, every military force needs to understand what humans represent. I recommend we declare war? No, Council Prime. I recommend we prepare for the fact that war, as we understand it, may no longer be possible. The chamber erupted in confused voices. Kale waited for silence, then explained the most terrifying discovery of, our military doctrine relies on inflicting casualties until enemy morale breaks. But human history shows they don't surrender when they take casualties. They become more determined. Their wars don't end when one side suffers too much to continue. They end when one side literally cannot continue. He displayed historical data from human conflicts, translated from their databases. Wars that lasted decades with casualty rates that would have ended any galactic conflict within days. Sieges where humans ate their own dead rather than surrender. Battles where they continued fighting with mortal wounds that would have incapacitated any other species. They have a concept called Pyrrhic victory, Kale explained. Winning at such a cost that the victory is worthless. Most species would consider this a failure. Humans consider it acceptable if the alternative is defeat. The representatives stared at data showing human conflicts where entire populations had chosen death over submission. Species across the galaxy typically surrendered when casualties reached 1% of their population. Humans had historical examples of fighting until 90% casualties, and they can't be reasoned with. Through fear, Kale continued, because they've faced worse than anything we can threaten them with. They can't be controlled through pain because pain doesn't control them. They can't be defeated through attrition because they view losing everything as just another problem to solve. Representative Corlani's voice was barely a whisper. What do they want, according to their own databases? To explore, to learn, to build, and to survive. They seem to have no interest in conquest for its own sake. Then perhaps we can coexist. That depends, Kale said grimly, on whether they consider our treatment of them an act of war. The chamber fell silent as the representatives contemplated the implications. They had tortured 3 humans for weeks, believing them to be primitive and helpless. Now those same humans were returning to a species that viewed extreme adversity as a normal part of life. How long before they develop faster-than-light communications? Asked Representative Valdane. Their technology advancement rate suggests 6 months, perhaps less. And how long before they develop military applications for their pain tolerance? Kale shuddered. They already have. Their mining operations take place in environments that would kill our best-equipped soldiers. Their industrial accidents would qualify as war crimes if inflicted deliberately. They live in conditions we would consider torture chambers. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. A galaxy-wide alert would be transmitted to every world, every government, every military installation. The message would be simple: humanity was coming, and nothing in their accumulated knowledge of warfare, diplomacy, or psychology would work against them. But even as the warning signals went out across the galaxy, Kale wondered if it was already too late. The human ship had disappeared into hyperspace 3 days ago. 3 days for them to report back to their government. 3 days for humanity to learn that they were not alone in the universe. 3 days for 8 billion apex survivors to realize that the galaxy was full of species who broke under pressures that humans considered mild inconveniences. The warning spread from system to system, carried by the fastest ships in the Valari fleet. But Kale couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't spreading a warning about an incoming threat. They were announcing the arrival of a species that made threat itself meaningless. In the depths of space, the mining ship New Soul continued its journey toward Earth, carrying 3 humans who had survived everything the galaxy could throw at them. Behind them, 47 species prepared for the arrival of beings who didn't understand the word surrender. The galaxy was about to learn that some species don't break under pressure, they just keep coming. 6 months after the escape of the human mining crew, the first official Valari diplomatic vessel approached Earth's solar system. The ship was massive and gleaming, designed to inspire awe and submission in primitive species encountering galactic civilization for the first time. Ambassador Zeffirlani stood on the bridge, reviewing the carefully prepared first contact protocols that had worked flawlessly for 3,000 years. Display of superior technology, demonstration of overwhelming force, followed by generous offers of protection and guidance in exchange for submission to galactic authority. What she found waiting for her changed everything. Earth's solar system bustled with activity that defied every prediction. Massive space stations orbited the inner planets, their hulls scarred and patched but undeniably functional. Mining platforms worked in asteroid fields that would have been considered too dangerous for automated systems, yet were operated by human crews. Most shocking of all were the ships that rose to meet them, vessels that looked like they had been designed specifically for war. "Ambassador," her tactical officer reported, his voice tight with disbelief. "We're reading 47 human vessels on intercept courses. Their weapon signatures are ... extensive." Through the communication array came a voice that was becoming familiar across the galaxy, calm, competent, and utterly unintimidated. "Velari vessel, this is Admiral Hyun-woo Kim of the Earth Defense Force. You are cleared to approach Earth orbit under escort. Please maintain course and speed as directed." Ambassador Rilani felt her skin shift to pale blue. The mining ship captain they had captured and tortured was now apparently a military commander, and he was giving orders to a diplomatic vessel representing 47 species. "Admiral Kim," she replied, using the formal diplomatic protocols. "I am Ambassador Rilani of the Velari Empire. We come in peace to establish formal relations between our peoples." "Understood, Ambassador. We look forward to discussions." "Fair. Warning, our diplomatic protocols may be different from what you're used to." The escort ships that guided them to Earth were unlike anything in Velari records. They moved with the confident efficiency of crews who expected their equipment to fail and had prepared for it. Hull plates were designed to be replaced in combat. Weapon systems had multiple redundancies. Even their communication arrays were built to function while being actively destroyed. These weren't ships built to avoid damage. They were ships built to continue fighting while taking damage that would disable any other vessel. When the Velari diplomatic shuttle landed at the human facility designated as United Nations Headquarters, Ambassador Rilani expected to meet with primitive leaders, who would be overwhelmed by contact with galactic civilization. Instead, she found herself facing people who had spent 6 months preparing for exactly this moment. The human delegation was led by a woman named Sujin Chang, who introduced herself as Earth's ambassador to galactic affairs. Standing beside her was a man called Tae-ho Yoon, identified as military strategic advisor. Both appeared calm, competent, and thoroughly prepared. "Ambassador Rilani," Sujin said with a warm smile, "welcome to Earth. We've been looking forward to this meeting ever since our people returned from their ... educational experience aboard your research vessel." The casual way she referred to weeks of systematic torture sent a chill down Rilani's spine. "Ambassador Chang, I must apologize for the unfortunate incident involving your citizens, Dr. Torvins. Research protocols exceeded acceptable parameters." "No apology necessary," Sujin replied pleasantly. "Captain Kim, Engineer Park, and Dr. Lee provided us with invaluable intelligence about galactic technology, social structures, and military capabilities. We're quite grateful for the learning opportunity." Rilani stared at the human diplomat. Every other species they had encountered viewed first contact through torture as a traumatic violation that required extensive reparations. The humans were treating it as a valuable intelligence-gathering operation. "I see. Then perhaps we can move forward with establishing formal diplomatic relations." "Of course. Though I should mention that our approach to galactic relations may be somewhat different from what you're accustomed to." Sujin activated a holographic display showing a map of local space. Red markers indicated human colonies, mining operations, and defense installations that had appeared in the 6 months since the Velari encounter. "We've established defensive positions throughout our local sector," she explained. Our expansion rate is approximately 4 new installations per month, with plans to accelerate as our shipbuilding capacity increases. Tejo stepped forward, with the bearing of someone who had spent his career planning for impossible situations. We've also developed new military doctrines based on what we learned about galactic warfare standards, which are that galactic warfare is based on psychological pressure rather than sustained conflict. Most species surrender when faced with superior force or unacceptable casualties. Tejo's expression was polite but firm. Humans don't surrender. The simple statement carried implications that made Rilani's diplomatic training feel inadequate. She had come prepared to offer protection in exchange for submission. Instead, she was facing beings who had turned their torture into a military intelligence briefing. Surely reasonable beings can find common ground for peaceful coexistence, she said. Absolutely, Sujin agreed. We're quite interested in trade, cultural exchange, and technological cooperation. We're particularly interested in medical technology. Some of our people returned from your ship with injuries that could benefit from galactic healing techniques. Of course, the Villari Empire has the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy. Excellent. In exchange, we can offer access to human industrial techniques, mining operations, and disaster response capabilities. Rilani reviewed her briefing. Materials, human disaster response capabilities? Their homeworld was classified as uninhabitable by galactic standards. What sort of disaster response do you mean?